Hello and welcome to MAGA, the podcast. Our mission is to show how Don the Con bamboozled our nation. Our goal is to help make sure the cult of MAGA goes down in flames by 2028, to stop it before MAGA becomes unstoppable and our democracy further decays into a dictatorship. If we want the cult of MAGA to end, we have to know how it began and why it spread. Now, this is not your racist uncle's MAGA. Our MAGA stands for I'm an angry asshole, the cult of Donald Trump. And I'm your host, the Disgusted. In our last episode, we took a look at how Trump is trying to snuff out another piece of the First Amendment, freedom of the press. And this week, we'll continue to explore how Trump is strangling free speech at the group level by launching overt and covert attacks to destroy the free press. So in his quest to muzzle the press, Trump has committed overt and covert attacks. He's used things like these lawsuits against CBS and ABC. Also utilized government interference via the FCC. He had Kimmel pulled off the air for a little bit, and he threatened to go after other shows he didn't like The View. And he started to fire and sideline opposing voices, such as FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez, who had this to say about the FCC's recent actions.
Broadcasters, ABC suspended Kimmel indefinitely. What is your reaction to the role that the commissioner played in that and how that portrays the commission?
I see this as a part of this administration's campaign of censorship and control. And what it's doing is it's weaponizing its licensing authority in order to bring broadcasters to heel and to really think twice about what they say about this administration. It's not because what the content of these broadcasts, whether it's the Jimmy Kimmel Show or CBS, is actually inciting violence or breaking the law in what it's doing. All it's doing is speaking about this administration in a way that it does not like. That is contrary to the First Amendment. And I think it's important to keep in mind, the FCC doesn't have the authority, the ability, or the constitutional right to revoke a license because of content like this.
So then why does Chairman Carr go out and say these things?
I think that the threat is the point. There is no way that the commission could revoke a license based on something like the Jimmy Kimmel Show. It is a very hard standard to meet to revoke a license, which is why it's so rarely done. But broadcast license to the broadcasters are extremely valuable. And so they don't want to be dragged before the FCC either in order to answer to an enforcement complaint of some kind or under the threat of possible revocation. So these threats are truly empty. We don't have the ability to actually take these actions, but it's the threat and the enforcement that is the point. It is to get capitulation as soon as possible. And when you see so much capitulation by the corporate parents, it's really disappointing because every time they capitulate rather than show courage, what they are doing is eroding our democracy and our First Amendment freedoms. This administration doesn't let go at the first capitulation. There is a clear threat and a clear, we're watching you and you better stay the course or we're going to come after you.
And going beyond this, the Trump administration decided to defund PBS and NPR, claiming left-wing bias.
Mr. President, public broadcasting has long been overtaken by partisan activists, plain and simple. This isn't just an abstract critique. NPR and PBS have revealed their left-wing bias time and time again.
The evidence doesn't show that this bias is baked in. Adfonts Media, an organization which rates media for bias and reliability, placed PBS NewsHour to the left of the ideological center, but label it as reliable and base its analysis and fact. In 2020, a peer-reviewed study in Science Advances found no evidence of liberal media bias in the story choices of political reporters, including those at NPR and PBS, despite the journalists themselves leaning left politically. A June 2025 study from the PBS Audience Research Organization found that viewers trust PBS partly because it's publicly funded, and reported that the audience evaluates its news as unbiased. Surveys show public media's audience don't see it as biased. A national poll of likely voters released in July 2020, 53% of respondents trusted public media to report news fairly, fully, accurately, and fairly, while only 35% extend that trust to the media in general. A 2021 report from the European Broadcasting Union links public broadcasting with higher voter turnout, better factual knowledge, and lower susceptibility to extremist rhetoric. In many ways, public media remains the last broadly shared civic commons. It's commercial-free and independently edited. Another study by the University of Pennsylvania's Annenberg School in 2022 affirmed that countries with independent and well-funded broadcasting systems consistently have stronger democracies. The study highlighted how public media works to bridge divides and foster understanding across polarized groups.
So this administration has, as you know, been going after public media, the defunding of public media. This administration initiated an investigation against public media very publicly, saying, well, we think you're violating your sponsorship rules, and we're going to investigate you now. And then after saying that, after sending a letter to NPR and PBS, this is harassment because they don't like the content of public media, which is really tragic. I mean, public media is a wonderful, wonderful part of our discourse. They're educational. They're very important for public safety. I don't know if a lot of people know they are a backbone for emergency alerts for the country. And so if we lose them, it's going to be a significant problem. We are seeing significant consolidation among broadcasters. And what you lose when you see this consolidation is diversity of viewpoints.
Unlike commercial media, where the profit motive creates incentives to emphasize conflict and sensationalism, public media generally seeks to provide balanced perspectives that encourages dialogue and mutual respect. Their reports are often longer and more in-depth than other outlets. They offer things like nuance to provide a critical counterweight to the fragmented, hyperpartisan news bubbles that pervade cable news and social media. And this skillful, more balanced treatment helps to lessen political polarization and misinformation.
And our people report straight down the line. And I think that not only do they do that, they do so with a mission that very few other broadcast organizations have, which is a requirement to serve the entire public. That is the point of public broadcasting, is we bring people together in those conversations. And so we've had a whole host of conservative voices on air. We've been making requests of the Trump administration to have their officials on air. We would like to see more people accept those invitations. It's hard for us to be able to say we can speak for everyone when folks won't join us.
Then we looked at the White House talking points and what they're putting on social media. Things like a July 2022 editor's note that said the Declaration of Independence had offensive language against Native Americans. We checked, and the word savages is used. The White House faults your editors for avoiding the term biological sex when discussing transgender issues. They apparently want you to use the term pro-life and faulted your use of the term anti-abortion rights to refer to activists. So when you see specific editorial criticisms like that, what do you interpret the intention of this being?
Well, I interpret the intention of this being trying to create a narrative around our editorial independence. And as I said in our...
To control it?
To control it. And I think that that is an affront to the First Amendment. We have an independent newsroom, and we will always have an independent newsroom. From my perspective, part of the separation of that the First Amendment offers is to keep government out. In fact, the statute that was written when the Public Broadcasting Act was signed into law was very explicit about interference from any member of the government, whether it is elected officials, whether members of independent agencies, because it is so sacrosanct, that division between the state and independent media.
On the social media front, again, the overt attack side, September 2025, YouTube's parent company, Google, settled a lawsuit with Trump for over $24 million concerning his temporary ban from the platform after January 6th insurrection fed a similar lawsuit for $25 million. So continuing these overt attacks, social media began to disassemble their guardrails. Facebook in January of this year
I want to talk about something important today because it's time to get back to our roots around free expression on Facebook and Instagram. We're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. We're also going to tune our content filters to require much higher confidence before taking down content. The reality is that this is a trade-off. It means we're going to catch less bad stuff.
I think it's tragic that American society now views facts as shutting down opinions and shutting out people. Look, facts are not opinions. We need to make sure that facts matter in this world. Otherwise, it's pure fucking chaos. If 10 people yell on Facebook that the sky is green, it's not going too far to point out that the sky is blue. And to the 10 people yelling their opinion that the sky is green, you were wrong. Point blank. Now, let's not get it twisted. This reversal wasn't a moment of clarity. Zuckerberg is a bitch. He's a coward. He always has been. Trump, when he was asked if Meta backed down, if Zuckerberg backed down as a response to threats, said this.
He's directly responding to the threats that you have made to him in the past? Probably.
Now, the real Facebook Oversight Board, an outside accountability organization whose name is a play on the company's official group, they're comprised mostly of academics, lawyers, and civil rights advocates, including early Facebook investor Roger McNamee, said that the policy changes represent Meta going full MAGA. The group said Meta's announcement is a retreat from any sane and safe approach to content moderation, and they called the changes political pandering. Facebook and YouTube began to reactivate hate accounts in September of this year. They reinstated accounts banned for posting false claims about COVID in the 2020 election. Those policies resulted in enforcement actions against prominent figures. An account belonging to Children's Health Defense Fund, a group affiliated with the now Health and Human Services Secretary and longtime vaccine skeptic Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was removed for posting vaccine misinformation in 2021. And Ron Johnson's account was temporarily suspended for posting dubious COVID treatment claims. YouTube rolled back policies that barred repeatedly posting some of these false claims about the 2020 presidential election. Accounts that were banned for violating those rules are able to rejoin the platform. YouTube said in a letter, adding that the move reflects its commitment to free expression. Free expression. That's what we're called lying nowadays. Free expression. Lying about vaccines during a national emergency is not free expression. Letting January 6 people post on your platform is not free expression. Their insurrection on January 6, where they stormed the Capitol and terrorized the police, is not free expression. That was fucking treason. That's a fact. See, fact checking can be fun. And YouTube stated that it's going to continue to develop and enforce its policies independently. In their letter, they pointed a finger at the Biden administration for urging them to remove content related to COVID-19 that did not violate the platform's policies. They felt that Biden created a political atmosphere that sought to influence the actions of platforms based on their concerns regarding misinformation. They stated it is unacceptable and wrong when any government, including the Biden administration, attempts to dictate how the company moderates content. And I call bullshit on that. I don't think it's acceptable at all that you fuckers won't moderate your platforms. You allow your platforms to be used by liars and traitors and call it free expression. Where is the line? The sky is not green. Facts are facts. And then we have the covert attacks, which are things like these mergers.
Would you vote to approve a deal between Nexstar and Tegna, given the current national ownership cap has not been lifted?
The national ownership cap. That cap was set by Congress. Congress did not say, and FCC, you can decide to lift it at your own whim. I think it's really important that the FCC maintain its focus on our pillars of broadcast policy: competition, localism, and diversity of viewpoints. And every time that we have one of these transactions, we are losing important viewpoints. And I don't think that's healthy again, for our democracy.
Networks are kissing ass to complete mergers that greatly compromise free speech in two ways. They get rid of a lot of voices. Take a look at Paramount and Skydance. This merger gives Skydance control of CBS and MTV networks.
This deal comes on the heels of Paramount paying $16 million to settle a lawsuit brought by President Trump, prompting accusations that the company essentially paid for merger approval. What's the deal? Was this a payoff dressed up as a settlement?
Well, look, it certainly seems that way. I mean, and all available evidence suggests that the answer is yes. And I would say in the business community, certainly in the media community right now, there's quite a bit of anxiety about a sort of pay-for-play regulatory environment, in which case, if you need any deal to get done, any merger, any acquisition, you might be forced to cough up. The number seems to be, whether it's Disney or Paramount, the number seems to be $16 million to the Trump presidential library. And so long as everyone plays ball here, so long as Paramount is willing to make that $16 million settlement, so long as Skydance, the new owners who are coming in, are willing to agree to certain FCC provisions like getting rid of DEI and allowing FCC to sort of dictate editorial controls, then you run into a position where, call it what you will, this is the way that deals get done, at least so long as Trump is in office. So long as business leaders, media leaders are willing to make these allowances in order to do business, and so long as Trump and FCC Chairman Brendan Carr are able to leverage the power of their offices in order to exact these settlements or these allowances, then yeah, that is the landscape.
This all feels like a major win for President Trump in his long-running fight against the media.
I think indisputably this has been a win. As you heard Chairman Carr say, he ran against legacy media, mainstream media, what he certainly would call the liberal media. And he is winning this on multiple fronts. He extracted a settlement from Bob Iger and Disney. He extracted a settlement from Sherry Redstone and Paramount. They have succeeded in cutting funding, of course, for PBS and NPR. So he's winning this on multiple fronts. I think the key is, in all of these cases, he had the leverage and he had the power.
And then there was Nexstar and Sinclair. They balked on Jimmy Kimmel because they didn't want to threaten their merger deals. And their merger deals are a big deal because they vastly break media consolidation rules. If these mergers go through, it's going to mean a huge decline in freedom of speech because there'll be a lot fewer voices allowed on the airwaves.
Well, in 1983, 50 companies controlled 90% of the U.S. media market, but now that number is down to just 5. Now, the Biden administration did try to change this. They tried to change merger policy for the first time in decades to stop consolidation like this. But as we all know, the supercharged. Specifically, the right-wing billionaires have now realized that they can use mergers and buyouts specifically to make America's media less democratic and more right-wing. After Elon bought Twitter in 2022, all the big billionaires bought in. The Ellison family of billionaires who own Oracle and Skydance are also allied with Trump, bought Paramount, and then they fired Stephen Colbert. And Skydance Paramount is now making a bid to merge Paramount and Warner Brothers, which would be one of the most destructive media mergers possible. It would devastate what is left of the entertainment industry, but maybe even more importantly, it would also put CNN's entire news organization under the same umbrella as CBS News, owned once again by a couple of right-wing billionaires. And just in the past couple days, the Trump administration announced that an entire group of billionaires, including the Ellisons, Mark Andreessen, and the fucking Murdochs, the Fox News people, are buying TikTok, putting the MAGA movement in control of the TikTok algorithm. So because of the merger frenzy that both parties allowed, we are now rapidly entering an America where we just don't have a free media anymore. Because the few companies that still exist, there's just a couple players still out there at this point, they're either owned by a right-wing billionaire, or they are so big and want to merge so badly that the government can force them to censor political speech. The fact is that censorship of views you don't like leads inevitably to censorship of views you do like. And when we allow media companies to consolidate and become monopolies, it leads to more censorship of literally all of us. And that is just, I don't use this word lightly, but it's fucking un-American. Like, I'm literally a comedian. Because I watched other comedians like Jon Stewart on TV being rude and mean and politically incorrect about the Iraq war. The government did not like that speech. A lot of people were offended by that speech, but they said it anyway. And guess what? They were fucking right. And even if they weren't, we should all get to live in a world where you can say what you want without the fear of the government coming after you. I mean, say what you will about cancel culture, but at least that's the culture. At least that's other people. It's not the literal fucking president coming for you. I mean, in the face of that, the endless debates we've had about cancel culture over the past 10 years seem trivial. I mean, sure, cancel culture, not a great thing. Government censorship is worse. This government censorship and media monopolies, this is the threat to free speech that all of us, right and left, need to be worried about.
Networks like Sinclair getting bigger and bigger.
Around Sinclair Broadcasting and its conservative bent. This is a company that owns stations all across the country. And last month I reported that the company was mandating its local stations to produce these media-bashing promos. There's been a lot of angst in local newsrooms about this. Now we're actually seeing the promos. Just a little taste of what these promos look like.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets simply aren't true without checking facts first. Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal and agenda to control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
I think you get the idea there, what's going on. All these anchors and all these markets are required to read this script. It's attacking fake news, but really what it's doing, it's kind of like the Fox Fair and Balanced slogan. It's a way of saying, we're fair, everybody else is biased. It's taking a page out of Trump's playbook. And I've been talking to staffers in markets, David, that say they're sickened by this, they're uncomfortable with it. Quote, my staff is up in arms about this.
I've been reporting this story, as you know, since last summer. My first concern was when they hired Boris Epstein from the Trump White House and made him the chief political animal. And stations were dictated to carry his, what I think of as talking points almost out of the Trump White House. There's a lot of pushback. Look, I think reporters and anchors, especially when you centralize a message, and this is what's important, Brian, if you are centralizing a political message to however many, more than 200 stations, I think it'll be if they get the FCC approval for this, to 200 stations, you have one of the great political messaging machines in the world. And especially, it's the local people, the people you see at the supermarket in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or your hometown in Wisconsin, Madison, Wisconsin, who are delivering these messages. They're not people from New York or Washington who you can dismiss. Much more powerful. I think Sinclair has the potential for that. And I think in some ways people react to that when they see this. Look, this thing by Deadspin is a really clever piece of editing, but it powerfully states what people have been saying about the danger of centralized messaging if a broadcaster decides it wants to send out political messages that way.
Sinclair claims it was simply warning viewers about the danger of fake news circulating on social media. But critics see a powerful company using local journalists to parrot one of Trump's most consistent talking points, the allegation that mainstream media cannot be trusted. NPR media correspondent David Folkenflik wrote, if history is any guide, Sinclair Broadcast will also pull news coverage on these stations in a more conservative direction and explore giving full rein to those beliefs on a national platform. Jane Hall, a professor at American University and a former media critic for Fox News, said that the promo is clearly supporting Trump's condemnation of most news outlets. She said it's naked in the sense that is forcing people in the news to read something that is a corporate piece of propaganda. Sinclair takes not only an ideological line, but at times a partisan line. It's been a very pro-Trump line. And Trump himself has tweeted support of the media group, calling other news networks among the most dishonest groups of people I've ever dealt with, and saying Sinclair is far superior to CNN and even more fake NBC. And of course he loves them. They parrot all of his bullshit and force their anchors and all these local stations to do the same. all the credibility that these local folks have with the people in their areas are now being force-fed to their audience, whether or not the anchors themselves believe any of this bullshit. They're being forced to say it or they lose their job. That is not freedom of speech. Now, what about on the print side? What problems do we have over there?
Billionaires Jeff Bezos and Patrick Soon-Shiong bought the Washington Post and the LA Times, where they forbid both papers from endorsing Kamala Harris in 2024.
And they're gutting their editorial departments. The Post Opinion's editor, David Shipley, chose to resign. He told his staff he was stepping down after reflection on how I can best move forward in the profession that I love. Bezos justified his decision in his memo to staffers saying, I am of America and for America and proud to be so. Post associate editor David Marinas, a legendary journalist whose association with the newspaper stretches back for more than 4 decades, wrote on Blue Sky that he would never write for the Washington Post again as long as Bezos owned it. He stated, one pernicious step after another, Bezos encroached on the Post editorial policy. Today, he sees it fully. One writer for the opinions section told NPR he was heartsick, adding, leadership matters. Now, what's so disheartening about Bezos' backstab is that he stood by the newspaper's dogged reporting during the first Trump administration. Their motto, democracy dies in darkness, began under his watch. They've won Pulitzer Prizes for coverage on the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol and Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election. But Bezos put his business interests before country. He's got a lot of money and deals with the federal government. And Trump's regulators made it clear that they intend to take an active role. The Post aggressively covered the new administration, but Bezos appears to have embraced the president's return to power this time around. He personally paid $1 million towards Trump's inaugural fund. Him and his fiance traveled to Florida, to Trump's Florida estate, Mar-a-Lago, to socialize with the Trumps. And along with the other digital chieftains, Bezos sat behind the president as he was sworn in for a second term. Shipley's 2.5 years brought acclaim for the newspaper, along with 2 Pulitzer Prizes and 2 Loeb Awards, but their standing was deeply undercut by Bezos' recent decisions, especially his decision to not allow the paper to endorse Kamala Harris for president in 2024. And since this interference, they've been bleeding veteran talent from their opinion and news sides. And this is important because the editorial section, also called the opinion section, that's where editors and contributors with a deep and broad understanding of the latest news offer their analysis, their take about what the hell's going on in this world. These are important voices. But by limiting the newspaper's opinion section to a single viewpoint, this doesn't align with their slogan that democracy dies in darkness. And this really sucks because when he purchased the Washington Post in 2013, Bezos said the paper would not change and that the paper's duty will remain to its reader and not the private interests of its owners. And fast forward to 2025, it's totally full of shit. The LA Times in October 2024 also prevented their editorial board from endorsing Kamala Harris.
The Los Angeles Times and the Washington Post are facing mounting backlash after the paper's publishers announced no presidential endorsements would be made this year. The LA Times is owned by billionaire Patrick Soon-Shiong, and the Washington Post is owned by Amazon's Jeff Bezos. NPR is reporting more than 200,000 people have canceled their Washington Post subscriptions and counting. A number of journalists have also resigned, including the editorials editor at the Los Angeles Times, Mario Garza, who wrote, "How could we spend 8 years railing against Trump and the danger his leadership poses to the country and then fail to endorse the perfectly decent Democrat challenger who we previously endorsed for the U.S. Senate?" David Hoffman.
I worked for 12 years writing editorials in which I said over and over again, we cannot be silent in the face of dictatorship, not anywhere. And I wrote about dissidents who were imprisoned for speaking out, and I felt that I couldn't write another editorial decrying silence if we were going to be silent in the face of Trump's autocracy. And I feel it very, very strongly that the campaign has exposed his intention to be an autocrat.
Is there any precedent for the publisher of the Washington Post overruling their own editorial board?
What's wrong here is that the timing. If they had made this decision early in the year and announced as a principle they don't want to issue endorsements, nobody would have even blinked. A lot of papers don't. People have rightly questioned whether they actually have any impact. What matters here was we are right on the doorstep of the most consequential election in our lifetimes. To pull the plug on the endorsement, to go silent against Trump days before the election, that to me was just unconscionable.
And Mario Garza, could you talk about the situation at the LA Times?
We presented our proposal to endorse Kamala Harris. And of course, there was no question that we had endorsed her. We spent 9 years talking about the dangers of Trump, called him unfit in 5 million ways. And Kamala Harris is somebody that we know. She's a California elected official. We've had a lot of conversations with her. We were going to endorse her, and there was no indication that we were going to suddenly shift to a neutral position. Certainly not within a few weeks or months of the election. At first, we didn't get a clear answer. Sounds like it's the same situation that happened at the Washington Post until we pressed for one. We presented an outline with these are the points we're going to make. And an argument for why not only was it important for us, an editorial board whose mission is to speak truth to power, to stand up to tyranny. Our readers expect it. We're a very liberal paper. There is no question what the editorial board believes that Donald Trump should not be president ever. Part of the bigger problem is we were never given a reason for why we were being silent. It's just, this is not a time in American history where anybody can remain silent or neutral.
This whole issue has been raised by some critics of Jeff Bezos that his company has a lot of business with the U.S. government, and whether that had any impact on Bezos' decision.
His company does have big business, and he's acknowledged it's a complicating factor in his ownership. But I can't really understand why he made this decision, and I don't think it's been very well explained. His explanation published today was that he wants sort of more civic quiet, and he thought an endorsement would add to the sense of anxiety and the poisonous atmosphere. But I disagree with that. I think, like in the LA Times, I think readers have come to expect us to be a voice of reason, and they've looked to endorsements at least for some clarity.
The subtitle, the slogan of the Washington Post, of course, democracy dies in darkness. It's being mocked all over social media. David Hoffman, your response to that, but also you won the Pulitzer Prize for your series Annals of Autocracy, and you talk about digital billionaires as well and what this means.
I would hope everybody would understand and acknowledge that we've done a lot of good for democracy and human rights. I've had governments react sharply to a single editorial. When we call them out for imprisoning dissidents, it matters that we are very widely read. And that's another reason why I feel this was a big mistake, because we actually were on a path for decades of championing democracy and human rights as an institution. And I have to tell you, I've wrote a book in Russia about oligarchs. I understand how difficult it is when you have a lively and independent group of journalists, and ownership really matters. And, we're not just another widget company. This is actually a group of very, very deep thinking and oftentimes very aggressive people that have a desire to change the world. That's the kind of journalism that the Washington Post has sponsored and engaged in. In 2023, we published a series of editorials that took a look deep inside how China, Russia, Burma, other places, how these autocracies function. One of the findings was that many of these dictatorships are using technology to clamp down on dissent, even things as tiny as a single tweet. Young people, young college students are being thrown in prison in Cuba, in Belarus, in Vietnam. And I documented these to show how this technology actually isn't becoming a force for freedom, but it's being turned on its head by dictatorship.
Now, Trump's campaign, of course, jumped on Garza's departure, saying the state's largest newspaper wouldn't even endorse a Democratic ticket after backing Harris in previous races. A billionaire on the right took away the newspaper's editorial choice and made it look like they didn't back the person that they actually did. This harkens back to the nation's founding, when newspapers were very partisan. The support they got, much of their funding, came from particular political parties. And we're going back to those days because we have these billionaires who are buying these newspapers and then gutting their freedom of the press, of their journalists being able to say what they believe is true. So why the hell hire them? Here's the thing, folks. The press does not have to break like this. They don't need to bend the knee. They need to fight back. When the president accused the New York Times and 4 of its reporters of demeaning him or defaming him ahead of the 2024 election, claiming that a series of articles sought to undermine his candidacy and disparage his reputation as a successful businessman,
a judge striking down President Trump's $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times just 5 days, though, after he filed it. The judge says Trump violated a key procedural rule in his lawsuit and says a complaint is not a, quote, protected platform to rage against an adversary.
This is an 85-page complaint against the New York Times and several of its reporters. This judge today issued what's called a sua sponte order, saying that Donald Trump's 85-page complaint violates a rule of civil procedure that says all complaints have to contain a short and plain statement of the allegations. A lawsuit has to state very clearly and plainly what you're asking for and why. 85 pages of invective doesn't cut it.
The Wall Street Journal's also been digging in. President Trump is suing them over the article they wrote in July about him sending a lewd birthday greeting to Jeffrey Epstein. In legal filings and on social media, Trump says he personally told Rupert Murdoch that the racy birthday greeting he supposedly sent 2 decades earlier did not exist. But Murdoch's Wall Street Journal posted it anyway, despite Trump's warning. And in the lawsuit, they specifically looked to depose Rupert Murdoch, and only Rupert Murdoch, who's now 94 years old. But here's the thing. The Wall Street Journal's legal team has a reputation of holding its reporting to exacting standards prior to publication and defending it resolutely afterward. They are not breaking.
The most recent lawsuit that Trump has filed has been against the Wall Street Journal and Rupert Murdoch, who, in sort of a strange plot twist, may actually be the one media baron who has both the fortitude and the market position to actually stand up to this president and not capitulate. That may be an area where he does not have the same leverage and the same power, particularly because, of course, Rupert Murdoch is the proprietor of Fox News, which has very much been in the president's corner.
And look, other Trump lawsuits against CNN, the Washington Post, and Bob Woodward have also been dismissed with little fanfare. ABC ultimately ended their suspension of Kimmel when people began to hit them in the bottom line.
The shocking capitulation of ABC and Disney to this kind of government intimidation and censorship was so shocking to the public that there was an enormous response. I mean, so many different parts of civil society came together to fight back against this attempt to end free speech. Entertainment unions like the Writers Guild of America, of which I'm proud to be a member, protested outside of ABC headquarters. In Hollywood, major show and movie creators said that they would stop working with Disney unless they reversed the decision. And most importantly, average members of the public waged an almost spontaneous boycott, quitting their Disney Plus, Hulu, and other subscriptions in droves and costing Disney billions. And these tactics were so successful that not only did Disney bring back Jimmy Kimmel, Brendan Carr, the chair of the FCC, walked back his threat. So there's a couple things we can take from this. First of all, these people are fucking weak. They're pushovers. They talk big, but they're like a cardboard stand-up movie actor. Give them a little push and they'll fall right over. And the next time a company is on the receiving end of threats, they need to push back. This kind of censorship, this kind of bullying is not popular. The people do not like it, and we will push back. The culture of America is strong, and if you try to take away our rights, we will cancel you. Collective power works. When we work together and fight back, we can win. But we have to remember that just because we won one battle does not mean the war is over. The threat to free speech is real, and even after the people currently in the White House leave, it will be ongoing because there is a structural problem in our economy. The media system is rigged against free speech, and we need to continue fighting back against that as hard as we can. But I also hope that you keep doing it too, because we have proven that when we raise our voices, it works.
Same thing needs to happen with Washington Post and LA Times. They need us more than we need them. Now, it's a reminder to people that we, the consumers, have the ultimate power. It sucks that we can't trust our democracy to do the right thing, but we can trust that corporations will always be greedy. If we hold back our dollars, we can get these companies to change their behavior real quick. These guys are bullies. If you punch them in the nose, a bully backs off. If you give them what they want, they don't stop. They just keep coming back for more. So that's all we've got for this week. If you want to help out the channel, please subscribe or follow us on your preferred podcasting platform, and tell your fellow disgusted Americans where they can find us to give us a listen. If you have a moment, please leave a rating on your preferred platform. They do make a difference, and it helps folks find the show. Thank you for tuning in, and have a great night, folks.